Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you all for joining me tonight. This is episode 153 of Hockey on the Spot. And for today's episode, we're going to continue with the NHL's 30 teams in 30 days. And for today, we are going to talk about the Montreal Canadiens, or the Montreal Canadiens in the French accent. The Montreal Canadiens have been a rather interesting team in the last couple of seasons. After completely missing the playoffs in 2011-2012 and finishing as one of the worst teams in the entire National Hockey League and the worst team in the entire Eastern Conference, they got the third overall pick in the 2012 NHL entry draft, used it to select forward Russian-American Alex Galchenyuk, and fortune started to change for the Montreal Canadiens. In the lockout-shortened year, they began the season. They would have a pretty similar start to they pretty much picked up where they left off in 2011-2012 and were one of the worst teams. They completely turned around at the end of the season, bolted at the end of the season, and went on to win the Northeast Division that year. Unfortunately for them, they were stunned in the first round of the 2013 playoffs by the 7th-seeded Ottawa Senators in 5 games. So, going into last season, the Montreal Canadiens had expectations to get better, and they did. Even though they didn't win the division last year, one could say that they maybe had a better year last year overall. But behind head coach Michel Therrien and general manager Marc Bergevin, what those two have been able to create in Montreal has been something special. Carey Price is one of the best at 27 years of age, is among the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League, and he'll be expected to come back healthy and be one of the best again. Max Pacioretty, at 25 years of age, is one of the best forwards in the league, especially among Americans. He had 39 goals last year. He led the team in goals and also led the team with 60 points. And defenseman P.K. Subban, who's also 25 years of age, is one of the best defensemen in the league, and he might just be the best player overall for the Montreal Canadiens. But right now, the Montreal Canadiens are in the midst of their longest Stanley Cup drought in franchise history. As of this past playoff, it's now been 21 years since the Montreal Canadiens, A, made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and B, won a Stanley Cup. However, they had a lot to be happy with last season. They came this close. They just barely missed winning the Atlantic Division, and their overall record from last year, 46-28-8. They finished with exactly 100 points, which was good enough for 3rd in the Atlantic Division and 4th in the Eastern Conference, which is still a pretty good record when it all comes down to it. I mean, they were one of the better teams in the league, and even though they didn't have home ice advantage in the first 2 rounds, they still had a lot to be happy with. They just barely missed finishing 2nd in the division. The Tampa Bay Lightning just barely managed to beat them out for 2nd place in the Atlantic Division. Obviously, the Boston Bruins won the President's Trophy, and by a wide margin in the East. And coincidentally enough, it would be the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Montreal Canadiens who would play each other in the first round of the playoffs. But the good news for the Montreal Canadiens was that Tampa Bay was without their starting goaltender, Ben Bishop, for that entire series. Had Ben Bishop been healthy for that entire series, we're potentially talking about a completely different series, with Tampa Bay having the home ice advantage. But because Ben Bishop was hurt, they had Anders Lindback starting, and Montreal took advantage of that especially with their trade deadline acquisitions. They had gotten Thomas Vanek at the trade deadline, so they were expected to be even better coming out of the trade deadline. They got him from the New York Islanders in exchange for a second-round pick and prospect Sebastian Kohlberg. But the Montreal took advantage of the Lightning not having Ben Bishop in goal, and in a big way, they went on to sweep the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round. A 4-game sweep. It was the only sweep of the entire playoffs, if I'm correct. But anyway, so they managed to pretty much win. They went on to win that first round series. I mean, one will tell you that they were lucky that Bishop got hurt, because if he wasn't, that it would have been a completely different series. And whether Tampa Bay would have won that series or not would be something to be seen. At the very least, it probably would have gone to 7 games. In the second round of the playoffs, was probably the most classic series of the entire postseason this year, as the Montreal Canadiens would go on to take on their biggest rivals and would reignite the biggest rivalry in the entire National Hockey League. They took on the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins, and that was a brutal series. Classic Boston versus Montreal series, a series in which Boston, of course, had home ice advantage, and a series that Boston was expected to take by a wide margin. Well, Boston held a 3-2 series lead with Game 6 going to Montreal. Montreal went on to tie the series, and then Game 7 in Boston, Montreal absolutely stuns the Bruin faithful, and the President's Trophy winning Bruins were absolutely stunned in the second round in 7 games by their arch rivals. It makes it kind of feel bad for the Bruins in a way to have this great season and then to have this spectacular season winning the President's Trophy only to lose to your biggest rivals. It's the most typical thing in sports. But Montreal, after beating the Bruins, really had the mentality that if they could beat the President's Trophy winners with the best goaltender in the National Hockey League in Tuukka Rask from last year, then they could probably beat anybody. And that was the mindset they had when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 2010, went on to play the New York Rangers in the Eastern Conference Finals. Unfortunately, nothing but bad luck for the Montreal Canadiens in that series. Carey Price got hurt in Game 1, and they also lost Alexei Yemelin for the series. They also lost Alexei Yemelin for the series, one of their better shot-blocking, shut-down defensemen. And in result, Montreal went on to lose that series in 6 games by the hands of the New York Rangers. Rangers, of course, would go on to the Stanley Cup Finals and would ultimately lose in 5 games to the Los Angeles Kings. But the Montreal Canadiens, that was a stroke of bad luck. That was a series they probably would have won had Carey Price stayed healthy and had Alexei Yemelin stayed healthy. I mean, Game 1 was a washout. The Rangers dominated that game and they crushed Montreal in that game. The Rangers deserved Game 1. But how the rest of the series would have looked like had Carey Price stayed healthy remains to be seen. I mean, give a lot of credit, though. When Carey Price did go down, they called up Dustin Tokarski from the Hamilton Bulldogs, and he was great. He was terrific in that series. He was absolutely terrific, and he gave Montreal a fighting chance in that series. He led them to 2 wins, an overtime victory in Game 3. Game 3 at Madison Square Garden, Tokarski absolutely stole the show. And then Game 5 wasn't his best game, but the offense for Montreal in that game pretty much powered them to the win that night, and a hat trick from Rennie Bork. But of course, ultimately, and even in Game 6, he was spectacular. Only 1 goal let up, but ultimately the Rangers would win that game by a final score of 1-0. So give a lot of credit to Tokarski and the way he played throughout that series. He was brilliant. And now, of course, some of the bigger questions going around is if Tokarski could maybe take over Peter Budaj's spot as the backup goaltender in Montreal. That's something we'll talk about a little later. But it's a great situation for Montreal to be in, to have that battle. But now, with losing that series to the New York Rangers, Montreal aimed to get better in the offseason and get rid of the pieces that were pretty much holding them back, and also have themselves a good draft in the first round. And Montreal, honestly, they had a lot to be proud of last season. They were the only Canadian team in the entire National Hockey League last year to make the playoffs, and they went all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. They represented the country of Canada. The whole entire country was on their side. They absolutely represented the whole entire country with style. Being the only Canadian team and going that far, that's pretty amazing. Because you look at teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Ottawa Senators, the Winnipeg Jets, the Calgary Flames, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Vancouver Canucks. They all missed the playoffs last year. Toronto was had the second best chance to make it, and the Toronto Maple Leafs almost did make it, but they fell short at the end of the season because of their bad defensive play at the end of the season. They had a very historic collapse, going 2-12-0 in their final 14 games. For Montreal, they have nothing to be ashamed of. They have a lot to be proud of. They were great last year. They represented the country well, and they went very far in the playoffs. They have a lot to be proud of. So, bravo to the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal fans, give yourselves a hand, give yourselves a round of applause. You guys did fantastic this year, and it will be great. And Montreal right now is pretty much the country of Canada, because now we're pretty much in a position going into this year where Montreal could be the only Canadian team in the playoffs once again. That could very well be the case this season as well. But we'll get into that later. But despite the fact that they represented the country well, they wanted to make some changes this offseason. They felt that there was changes that needed to be made, and one big change in particular was letting go of their big rental from the trade deadline last season, Thomas Vanek. Thomas Vanek was the top unrestricted free agent on the market after Montreal announced that they would not be re-signing him. He did not play well in the playoffs. He was okay offensively in the playoffs, but defensively he was absolutely horrible. And it was because of his poor defensive play overall as a player that led them to make the decision to let him go. He went on to sign a 3-year deal with the Minnesota Wild. Immediately after the Stanley Cup Finals were over, they also traded former first-round pick Louis LeBlanc, who was an unrestricted free agent. They dealt him to the Anaheim Ducks for a 5th-round draft pick, and Anaheim went on to sign him to a 1-year deal. He'll probably play in the minors. They let go of fourth-line center Ryan White. He went on to sign with the Philadelphia Flyers. This came after I did that video, so we'll cover that when I do the recap. And they also let go of their captain, Brian Giunta, who had been their captain for 3 years now, and had been a member of the team since 2009. They decided not to re-sign him. He went on to sign with the division rival Buffalo Sabres. He signed a 3-year deal with the Sabres as they look to get a little bit younger this season. But then they also made a couple of trades this offseason. One that was pretty good, but then there was another one that really didn't make sense. Starting with the one that didn't make sense, they decided to trade away defenseman and alternate captain Josh Georges to the Buffalo Sabres, and all they ask for in return is a 2nd-round pick for the 2016 NHL draft. So yes, it's not even a 1st-round pick, it's a 2nd-round pick, and it's not even for another 2 drafts. So that was a trade that I think was very poorly handled by the Montreal Canadiens. And because of how bad they handled it, and because of the fact that Josh Georges is regarded as one of the best, if not the best, shutdown defensemen in the game, that was considered one of the bigger trades of the offseason, because Buffalo gets themselves a really good shutdown defenseman, a guy who could come in and play on the top defense pair or in the top four. Josh Georges is an above-average shutdown defenseman. He hits, he blocks shots, and he's a leader. Had he still been with the team, he probably would have been the next captain for Montreal because they were serious about letting Brian Giunta go. They were going to let him go no matter what. Josh Georges was the next captain in Montreal. And now he can't be because now he's with the Buffalo Sabres. So that to me was a bit of a mistake by Montreal. But at the same time, the one good thing it does do is that it allows a guy like Alexei Yemlin to go back to his natural left side and play there where he does a lot better. They have a lot of expectations for Alexei Yemlin. They think he can come in and be pretty much their next Josh Georges. They have both Jared Tenorti and Nathan Beaulieu, who could both come up and become very important players for them. They have Mike Weaver, who's older but one of the more underrated trade deadline acquisitions this offseason. He was so good when Montreal acquired him from the Florida Panthers. And then the other trade Montreal made this season was that they traded away Montreal native Danny Briere. They ended up trading him to the Colorado Avalanche, and in return, they acquired forward Pierre Alexander Parenteau, or P.A. Parenteau for short. Briere had a year left on his deal, and they felt he really underachieved last year and that he's getting on in his years. For P.A. Parenteau, this is a guy who, after a really great first season with the Colorado Avalanche, he was one of their best players in the lockout-shortened year. Last year, he didn't play in the lineup a lot. He got hurt. Ended up missing a lot of time during the season. Came back, played the entire playoffs, but he was not very good last year. Through 55 games played, only 14 goals, 19 assists, and 33 points. He was a +3 and only had 30 penalty minutes, and he generated 110 shots on goal, but the fact of the matter is he didn't score as much as maybe you would have liked him to. And in the playoffs, through all 7 games, he wasn't good either. Only a goal and 2 assists, 3 points, an even plus-minus rating, 2 penalty minutes, and 17 shots on goal. So he wasn't very good last year, and now he's going to a market in Montreal that holds a lot of pressure, that puts a lot of pressure on their players. But P.A. Parenteau is the big acquisition by the Montreal Canadiens this offseason. He is the big acquisition for Montreal this offseason. He's the biggest name coming over. But this is a guy who has unreal hands, great passing ability. This is when he's playing at his best. Has a great first pass ability, and he's a really good two-way player as well. When he's playing at his best and when he's playing with a good player, we saw it when he was with the New York Islanders and his first year with the Colorado Avalanche. His hands are really, really good. And he always makes smart plays out there. He's a very smart player. And he is a top 6 forward. He'll add on to the top 6 very nicely. And then as far as other additions go, those were all the subtractions. They also brought in every other player they got in was pretty much to add some depth. They brought in center Manny Malhotra. He's coming over from the Carolina Hurricanes. He was a big return player last year. After it was believed that his career was over, the 34-year-old's career was over. After that injury he suffered with the Vancouver Canucks in the lockout-shortened year, he comes to the Carolina Hurricanes, and he plays really well, shows no signs of the injury. I mean, okay, well, maybe a little bit of signs, but not a whole lot of signs. He was really good. He's always, even though he's usually a minus player, he's always regarded as a really good defensive forward and a really good face-off winning center. He wins most of his face-offs. He's really good at it. So, good job. Good job by the Montreal Canadiens to get this guy. Really good defensive forward. He'll make the penalty killing unit even better than it already is, and they had a really good penalty kill last year. Then they also added defenseman Tom Gilbert. He's coming over from the Florida Panthers, and this signing was all about analytics. He's 31 years of age. He'll be 32 in January, so he's still relatively young, but he's a right-handed shot on the blue line, and he's more of an offensive defenseman. And even though he was a -5 last year, one could say that it was because he was playing on a bad team. He hasn't really played on a good team throughout his career, or when he hasn't really been given the best of chances. Last year for the Florida Panthers, he played 73 games and had 3 goals. He only had 3 goals, but he's more of a playmaking offensive defenseman anyway. 25 assists, 28 points, only 18 penalty minutes, and 93 shots on goal. He played on the top defense pair with Brian Campbell, and they were one of the most underrated top pairs in the National Hockey League. They went up against the league's best players, and they were really, really good together. So, it was kind of a surprise that Florida opted not to re-sign this kid. He now comes to the Montreal Canadiens with the expectations to maybe quarterback the power play. He's got a big shot from the point. He can help quarterback a power play. And Montreal's power play last year, it's a help that they need because their power play last year was not that good. Was not that good. They were a great defensive team last year. They were 8th in the league in goals against, and their penalty kill last year was 4th in the entire league. However, offensively, they were really bad last year. They were one of the worst. They were among the bottom of the league in offense last year. They were 21st in the league with a 2.55 goals for, and their power play last year was 19th in the league, which isn't the worst. However, despite that it was the 19th ranked power play, most of those power play goals came before the Olympics. After the Olympics, they had the worst power play in the league coming out of the Olympics. So, offensively, it was not a good year for the Montreal Canadiens. And another problem with them last year is that they were among the most penalized teams in the National Hockey League. They were 26th in the league with a perfect 13.0 penalty minutes percentage. Only the Ottawa Senators, Vancouver Canucks, St. Louis Blues, and Philadelphia Flyers had more penalties last season than the Montreal Canadiens. Discipline is something that they'll hope to work on this offseason. But going back to Tom Gilbert, I think he's going to help them out in a big way. He's really going to help them out in a big way. And he just adds more depth to that defense, to a defense that already lost Josh Georges. And he will make competition happen between Jared Tenorti and Nathan Beaulieu, both first-round picks, Tenorti from 2010 and Beaulieu from 2011. It'll be interesting to see which one will play this year. That's going to be the big competition in Montreal for training camp. And they also have another youngster that they signed this offseason, Yuri Sekic, who's coming out of a native of the Czech Republic, coming out of the KHL. He played for Lev Prague of the KHL last year and was really good through 47 games, 11 goals, 17 assists, 28 points, and only 18 penalty minutes. That may not seem like a lot, but in the KHL, those are considered to be pretty big numbers. There's a lot of expectations for this kid. He was a he used to be a really good player in the United States Hockey League. He was considerably um, a big star in that league. And when he went to the KHL for the last few years, he was really good, a really good defensive player. But his offensive game has gotten better, and it's believed that he can come to North America and really help out Montreal's offensive numbers, and he could become a good offensive player. Not to mention, he's really well known for good puck possession. He'll help out Montreal. He'll probably play in the bottom six. And heck, he may not even play at all. He may even be a 13th forward. But when he does play, he'll come in with the mindset of trying to help the team win. So that was a good signing. And then, of course, Montreal still has some players that are unrestricted free agents. George Parros, Douglas Murray, and Francis Bouillon. George Parros and Douglas Murray, both of them will not be back for Montreal this offseason. Francis Bouillon, however, that is still a possibility. They're still thinking about whether they're going to bring Francis Bouillon back or not. If they do re-sign him, it'll probably be to a one-year deal. He is a good shutdown defenseman, but whether they feel they still are in need of his services or not remains to be seen. But the big move by Montreal this offseason came just prior to an arbitration hearing, where Montreal made their contract signing history when just before arbitration kicked in, and where Subban was only going to be where they had PK Subban, they had struggled signing him all off season, and it looked like he was only going to be re-signed to a one-year deal that was going to be rewarded through arbitration, or he was going to leave. He went on to sign the richest contract in franchise history, 8 years, $72 million, making him the defenseman with the highest salary cap charge in the entire league. And it is great for Montreal that they got this guy signed up long-term. He is a proven top two defenseman in the National Hockey League. He was the key man on defense last year. I believe he was a finalist for the Norris Trophy as well. He is a former Norris Trophy winner back in the lockout shortened year, and he does so many great things out there. He's quick, got great skating ability, great hands as well, moves the puck well, and has that big shot from the point. And has developed a bad reputation throughout the league because of how good he is and how well he gets under the skin of the opposition. Kind of like the modern-day Chris Pronger, only a much faster player and a much better skater than Chris Pronger, because he's not as big as Chris Pronger. He's pretty much the villain on defense right now. But great job by the Montreal Canadiens to get this guy re-signed, because he's going to help them out in the long run. As we now take a look at some of the big questions for the Montreal Canadiens this offseason. Who will fill the leadership void? Again, Brian Giunta is no longer there, and Josh Georges is no longer there. They were the leaders in the locker room. It was evident that Giunta was going to leave, but it was believed that Georges was going to be his successor until they traded him. So now the big question is, who's going to be their captain? Well, the way I see it, they have three guys who could probably battle for the honor, one of them being PK Subban, but they also have Andrei Markov, who's been on the team for a while. He was formerly considered their key man on defense offensively, but he's a veteran, and he knows what it takes to play in this league. He can show the kids it's the way. He would be a great leader. And then Max Pacioretty's another guy who could be a captain on that team. I personally would not be surprised at all if it ended up being PK Subban, but we'll see. We'll see who eventually gets the C in Montreal. Who will grab the available spot among the top 9 forwards? Well, Well, as I said before, they got P.A. Parenteau from the Colorado Avalanche for Danny Briere, and they also have Brendan Gallagher. But Michel Therrien is a guy who believes in using 3 offensive lines, and it's still unclear who the third right winger would be. I mean, it possibly could be a guy like Michael Bournival. Michael Bournival is a major possibility, but they also have Yuri Sekic, who they signed out of the Czech Republic, though he is more of a left winger and he's a left-handed shot. So I don't know how that would work out. But it's going to be interesting. But they also have guys like Sven Andrighetto and Jacob De La Rose, who are going to get good looks in camp and could possibly make the team this year. What will be the impact of Andrei Markov and PK Subban playing together full time? Because Josh Georges got traded, it makes room to move Alexei Yemlin to his natural left side, which means he will no longer play with his regular defense partner Markov, who plays the left side. So it would be pretty much evident to think that the veteran Markov would move up to the top deep pair with PK Subban, which would make a lot of sense. Whoever comes up and fills that other void in the top 4, one believes that it's going to be Tom Gilbert, but we'll see. It's going to be really interesting to find out who can do it. Speaking of defense, who will claim the 6th defense spot? Again, with the departure of Douglas Murray and the strong possibility of veteran Francis Bouillon not returning, now there's a hole on defense on that third pair with Mike Weaver. And it's going to be a competition. They still have a guy like Davis Drewiski, but he's more of a 7th option. He's more of a 7th option, and he's a left. He's more of a 7th option, so he probably would not be the guy. Would not be ideal. He did not play a single game last year. But so it would be reason to believe that it would be a guy, either Nathan Beaulieu or Jared Tenorti. They're both going to battle for spots this year, so we'll see. And will the power play improve? Again, their power play was 19th in the league last year, but they were one of the worst in the league over the second half. So, you figure with all that talent that they have, PK Subban and Andrei Markov with those big shots from the point. Now they had another big point shot in Tom Gilbert. Nathan Beaulieu is a kid that can play power play minutes if he is the guy who fills that extra spot on defense. They have Max Pacioretty on offense, Thomas Plekanec, David Desharnais, Alex Galchenyuk. You think of all these guys that they have. They have so much talent on that team. Now they add P.A. Parenteau, another sick player with gifted hands, another gifted player with great hands, who also is really good on the power play, is a good setup man on the power play, which is a big reason why they acquired him to help out their power play because of his passing ability and puck possession numbers. So, it's going to be interesting to see if their power play can improve. We all know there's nothing wrong with their penalty kill, but their power play definitely has to be better. And honestly, one of the bigger questions that I may have for the Montreal Canadiens is, did they do enough to be better than they were last year? I mean, did they really replace the pieces that they lost? I mean, despite the fact that Thomas Vanek is a one-dimensional player, that's still a really good offensive player that you're letting go, and that's a really big void to fill. From that aspect, I really feel like they maybe didn't really do enough, and actually I did see that they actually were considerably one of the weaker teams in the offseason this year. They were one of the worst teams during the offseason this year. Now, for them, it doesn't change anything. As far as their expectations for this year. But it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder, can they really be a better team this year? Can they really build off of their Eastern Conference Finals appearance from last year? That's going to be a mystery this offseason, And another big question I have for them is, can they be more disciplined? They don't have George Parros anymore. Not that he really played all that often anyway, but they let go of him. They pretty much, scrapped off a few of the pieces that could have been that issue, but they still have a lot of guys that take a lot of penalties. You think of guys like Brandon Prust, and Travis Moen, So it's interesting, and Dale Weiss as well. So I don't know. I actually don't think that that's something that's going to be possible. I still think they have a lot of guys who are going to take a lot of penalties. They're going to be one of the more penalized teams in the league again. And that is something that could hurt them in the long run. Hopefully they can fix that problem, but we'll see. It's going to be something that's going to be very looked upon this season with the Montreal Canadiens. As we now take a look at their projected lineup for the 2014-2015 season. It is expected that Thomas Plekanec is going to be the top-line center. And however, whose wingers are going to be for this season remains to be seen. P.A. Parenteau is the guy projected to take that top-line right wing spot, and that makes sense. He's a proven top six forward in this league, and a proven top-line guy as well. He's scored 60 points in the past, so I think that's something that makes sense. And then Alex Galchenyuk is expected, because of the center depth of Montreal this season, Alex Galchenyuk is expected to be the odd guy out at center, as he'll be projected to move from center to left wing. He's a left-handed shot, and he's played wing in the past. Playing wing is nothing new to him. He's played right wing even. I believe he played right wing at the 2013 World Junior Championships. So, it's something that makes sense, I don't mind the move from center to wing, and some say that maybe he has the potential to be more effective on the wing. He'll have less responsibility, and he'll still be able to be a good offensive player. This is going to be a big season for Alex Galchenyuk, as he'll be expected to really improve on his offensive numbers from last year. Second line. They have David Desharnais centering, Brendan Gallagher on the right, and Max Pacioretty on the left. Now, one could say that Max Pacioretty probably belongs on the top line, and one could argue the same for Brendan Gallagher. But it's the chemistry factor that really is the big thing here, because Thomas Plekanec is the true number one center, despite the fact that he did have kind of a bad year last year. And the chemistry between Pacioretty and Desharnais cannot go unnoticed. Desharnais, though, did have more points than Plekanec last year, but Plekanec had more goals. That doesn't change who is the top-line center and who's the second-line center, but, it's very possible that line of Desharnais, Gallagher, and Pacioretty could be promoted if the line of Plekanec, Parenteau, and Galchenyuk isn't performing as well as the Pacioretty line. Third line, they have Lars Eller centering, Michael Bournival on the right, and Rennie Bourque on the left. Michael Bournival, now this is kind of interesting though, because Michael Bournival, more of a left winger, and Rennie Bourque, even though he's left-handed, likes to play the off wing. So this is a little interesting. I think that's something that'll be switched. Rennie Bourque, obviously, has not been the same offensive player that we've seen him be in the past. However, last year in the as bad as he was in the regular season last year, in the playoffs, he really took it up another notch. He was one of their best players, if not their best player in the playoffs last season. Definitely, arguably their best forward. He was so good in the playoffs last year. And even at 32 years of age, it's got to make you think that Reddy Bourque may have the potential to get himself back in shape. He will be 33 in December, so this will be an interesting season for Reddy Bourque. He's going to be someone to watch this year. Michael Bournival was a really good youngster last year. He's ready to come up and take on some more responsibility as a player and maybe improve on last season. He's 22 years of age, so he's still really young. So he has the potential to improve. And then on the fourth line, you got Manny Malhotra centering Brandon Prust and Dale Weiss. They have Prust on the right side, and Weiss on the left side, but that's going to be the other way around. There's no doubt that that's going to be switched to the other way around this season. And then they have Yuri Sekic as the 13th guy and Travis Moen as the 14th guy. That tells you how deep Montreal's lineup is up front. They have a good forward core, because if Travis Moen is your 14th guy, then that speaks a lot of volumes about the forward group. Because Travis Moen is a proven roster player and a really good fourth-line player, really good penalty killer. And if he's not going to be playing a lot, if he's not going to be playing a whole lot, in Montreal, then don't be surprised at all to see Travis Moen, to see a guy like Travis Moen get traded for a mid-round draft pick or something. He would be a great addition to a team that's in need of a fourth liner. So overall, a very good core of forwards. That's a very good forward core, and I would take that group of forwards any day of the week, even without Thomas Vanek, even without Danny Briere. This is still a very formidable forward group. I mean, I guess P.A. Parenteau, is really the guy who's coming in to replace Vanek. He's nowhere near as good as Vanek, but it's still a good addition, and Parenteau's a really good player. So, again, with the youngsters coming up, the youngsters that have the potential to come in and battle, they also have Christian Thomas and Gabriel Dumont, who are both capable of cracking the roster this year. Jacob De La Rose, they have him. They have, they have Jared McCann, who's another kid who can maybe steal a spot. Nikita Sherbak is probably going to need more time. Nikita Sherbak, of course, was their first-round pick this year, number 26th overall. A Russian player who plays more of a North American-style game, more of a playmaker than a goal scorer. He played for the Saskatoon Blades of the Western Hockey League last year, through 65 games played. He only had 28 goals, but he had 50 assists, and that combined for 78 points. So more of a playmaker than a goal scorer. He's a right winger, and he's a very gifted player, but he'll probably need a couple of years before he's ready to go. But overall, that's a very good forward group. And Sekic, at 22 years of age, he's going to be a good player. Whether it's him making it full-time this year or being a 13th forward this year and then coming up next year and being a good force for them. On defense, even without Josh Georges, this is still a really deep defense group as well. Andrei Markov is expected to move up to the top pair with PK Subban. That's going to be a good defense pair, good top two. I mean, there's obviously a concern about the defensive abilities about this defense pair because they're both offensive defensemen. But I don't think there's going to be an issue there. On the second pair, Alexei Yemelin will move back to his natural left side, and he'll probably play with Tom Gilbert. Tom Gilbert will probably be the guy playing on that second pair. He'll man the right side, and Yemelin will man the left side. And then the third pair, again, the competition is between Nathan Beaulieu and Jared Tenorti, but the roster here projects that it'll be Nathan Beaulieu playing in the lineup next to Mike on the left side, next to Mike Weaver on the third pair, and Davis Drewiski will be the seventh guy. But that may not actually be the case even. I see Davis Drewiski as more of an eighth guy. Whichever one of the kids between Tenorti and Beaulieu don't make the lineup, whichever one of them doesn't make the lineup this year, that one will probably be the seventh defenseman. They're both ready to play. So once again, a good forward group. I'd take that forward group any day of the week, even without Thomas Vanek. And I take this defense group any day of the week as well, even without Josh Georges. I mean, again, it's hindered a little bit without Georges back there, but it's not going to be that bad, because especially if Yemelin does pan out to be what Josh Georges is, then all of a sudden, Josh Georges looks more like, space that needed to be moved, So hopefully Yemelin can come in and be a better player than he already is. He's going to be relied on a lot more this season. He's 28 years of age. He'll be relied on a lot more this season to be a better player. And so he moves the puck well. He skates well. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to watch him. And then in goal, obviously, another great situation in goal. Another tandem that I would take any day of the week. Carey Price as the starter. And they have Peter Budaj listed as the backup. However, don't be surprised at all if Dustin Tokarski comes in and takes Peter Budaj's spot as the backup. And then, of course, they also have another youngster in Zach Fucale, who's a young prospect on the rise, another goaltender. Montreal has a great situation in goal right now. Their goaltending depth is so deep. Any way you look at it, it's a very deep group because, So, this Montreal team, they also, going back on defense for a minute, they have another defenseman in Greg Pateryn. He has a potential to crack the lineup as well. But overall, this Montreal team really is hard to pinpoint any weaknesses because they have a really good forward group, they have a really good defense group, and their goaltending depth is set. Carey Price, he'll come back healthy. He'll come in. He's expected to be ready for the opening day of training camp, and he's expected to pretty much pick up where he left off before the injury. I don't see him showing any signs of the injury, so I think Montreal's going to have no problems. If we were to pick out a weakness between these three, probably up front just because of how bad their offense was as a whole last year. It wasn't the worst offense in the league, but there's still room for improvement up there. The power play needs to be better, and they need to have more goals per game. And they need to not take as many penalty minutes. So, it probably is the forward group that is their weakness, but it's not that much of a weakness. Overall, there's very little weakness for this team. As we now take a look at Montreal's top 10 prospects, this is a rather unique top 10 prospect pool because it's very worldly. They have at least one player from a lot of different countries. They have 3 Canadians, but everyone else is from another country. They have Jacob De La Rose is listed as their number 1 prospect. And I'm not going to argue with that, even though he's their second round pick, number 34th overall from the 2013 draft. His numbers may not have been great, Through 49 games for Leksand of the Swedish Hockey League, only 7 goals and 6 assists, 13 points. But I've seen this kid play, Jake De La Rose. He was a major impact for Sweden at the 2014 World Junior Championships. He did not have a very good 2013 tournament, but he had an excellent 2014 tournament. 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points, and only 6 penalty minutes through 7 games. So Jacob De La Rose, I think that's a good player. I've seen him play. He's really fast, got great hands. So, coming out of Sweden, that's a good number 1 prospect right there. Number 2 is Nikita Sherbak from Russia, but plays a North American game. Their first round, 26th overall pick from this year. Yuri Sekek from the Czech Republic, an undrafted forward who they signed this year offseason on July 1st, 22 years of age. He's ready to play this year. He's from the Czech Republic. He's number 3. Michael McCarron, a native of Grosse Pointe, Michigan. He's ready to play this year. I mean, he was their first round pick from 2013, 25th overall. He's a project a couple of years in the making, but he's going to be a good two-way player when he comes up. Big forward, very mobile. Then we got a couple Canadians, Zachary Fucale, number 5, in goal, and Charles Hudon, number 6, at center. Number 7 is Sven Andrighetto, a right winger from Switzerland. He's another really good player. I've seen him play. Tim Bozon is number 8. Now, Tim Bozon was born in St. Louis, Missouri, so he's an American-born player, but he represents France. He's got a French. He represents France, so he's technically a French. Arturi Lehkonen from Finland is number 9, and then the third Canadian, Dalton Thrower, is number 10. So this is a very good top 10 prospect group, and I would put it up there with the Buffalo Sabres and the Detroit Red Wings. I'd probably say it's third. I think it is deeper than the Florida Panthers, and I think it is much deeper than the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it is also deeper than the Ottawa Senators. It's not as deep as the Buffalo Sabres, and it's not as deep as the Detroit Red Wings, though. But it's up there. It is up there. So, I mean, really good group. Really good group right there. I mean, actually, I would probably battle with Ottawa's group. I actually almost forgot Ottawa has a really good group. Their group is better than the Florida Panthers. I think I said that. I forget which one I said, but I kind of looked at it again. I'd say that Ottawa's is actually slightly better than Florida's. But you know what? I mean, but Montreal's got a really good group here. I like this forward group. But it just goes to show the Atlantic Division's prospect pool is really, really good. Might be the best in the NHL so far. But of all these top 10 prospects for Montreal, obviously you have Jacob De La Rose at number 1. Of all these guys, the prospect that has always impressed me the most, without a doubt, has been their number 5 prospect, goaltender Zachary Fucale. I mean, this guy, oh my gosh. He was the top goaltender from the 2013 NHL entry draft. He was their second-round pick at number 36th overall, and some people believe that he probably could have been picked in the first round. Last season was another great year for him. For the Halifax Mooseheads of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Through 50 games played, 36 wins, and only 9 losses and 6 overtime losses, and he had 6 shutouts as well. A 226 goals against average and 907 save percentage. This guy just continues to dominate the QMJHL, and he is going to be a starting goaltender in the National Hockey League one day. Whether it's with Montreal or another team remains to be seen, because you obviously have Carey Price in goal, and then you have Dustin Tokarski with the potential to be a starter one day as well. after what he showed in the playoffs. And Dustin Tokarski, he's only 24. He'll be 25 in September. So to have a youngster like Fucale who can come up at some point in the next few years and be a force in the NHL, I mean, it takes longer for goaltenders to develop. He's not expected to come up for another 3 years, 2017, 2018. But one can anticipate that when he does come up, he's just going to be an absolute stud. He really is. I like Zach Fucale. He has the potential to be something special in this league one day. So Zachary Fucale is my top prospect for the Montreal Canadiens. Now, the player that I think has to be better for the Montreal Canadiens this year in order for them to take it to that next step and get back into the playoffs, get back to the Eastern Conference Finals, and maybe even go farther than that. This is actually a very hard decision. Montreal has so many players to choose from. I mean, you got Alex Galchenyuk, who may be the logical choice, actually. But, I mean, it's not like he had a bad year last year. He just got injured and missed a lot of time last year. And one would maybe say that if he didn't miss any of that time, he probably would have had a better offensive output last year. Maybe close to 50 points and close to 20 goals. But he's a guy who's expected to take it to the next step this year. But I'm not going to say Alex Galchenyuk. I was thinking about it. But I don't think it's going to be him. Thomas Plekanec is a possibility as well. I feel like last year wasn't his best year. But honestly, when I really look at it closely, the player who I actually think needs to be better this year in order for Montreal to have a chance this year, believe it or not, I'm going to say has to be Rennie Bourque. And why I'm saying Rennie Bourque, even though he's 32 and he's going to be 33, last year he showed his potential in the playoffs. He was one of their better forwards in the playoffs. He had, through 17 playoff games, 8 goals, 3 assists, and 11 points. A +4 rating, 27 penalty minutes, 51 shots on goal. He was one of their better forwards in the playoffs, both offensively and defensively. Maybe even arguably their best forward overall. Compare that to the regular season. He played 63 games, 9 goals, 7 assists, 16 points, a -1 rating, 32 penalty minutes, and 118 shots on goal. Now, he had a lot of shots on goal, but his numbers last regular season were just flat out awful. And I believe he even played on the 4th line at times. So, put that playoff potential in mind, and now all of a sudden, the way he played in the playoffs, he now has expectations on his shoulders to maybe carry that out through this regular season. You know? So Rennie Bourque is going to be a player to watch this year. Whether he plays the left wing side or plays the right wing side remains to be seen. But I think Rennie Bourque is the guy that needs to be better for Montreal this year in order for them to maybe have the potential to go farther. Overall, are the Montreal Canadiens a playoff team? Yes, they are. I think they are a playoff team. Again, and it's pretty much a similar situation to last year. Last year, as I said earlier, Montreal was the only Canadian team in the playoffs, and they went all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. This year, Montreal has the potential to be the only Canadian team to go to the playoffs once again. And why is that? Well, of all the Canadian teams, they have the best group of forwards, even without Thomas Vanek and Danny Briere. They have the best group of defensemen, even without Josh Georges. And Carey Price is the best goaltender playing on a Canadian team right now. You look at all the other Canadian teams and what they have in goal. Not to mention Montreal has the best goaltending situation with Peter Budaj and Dustin Tokarski, who could both battle for the backup job. I mean, look at what the other Canadian teams have. the Toronto Maple Leafs. Jonathan Bernier and James Reimer. Now that's probably the best duo among all the Canadian teams because both of them have the potential to battle. Both of them are going to battle each other for starting jobs, and James Reimer was re-signed. But as far as individual effort goes, neither of them individually are as good as Carey Price. Ottawa Senators. Craig Anderson and Robin Lehner, once again, probably one of the better duos in the league, but individually, neither of them are as good as Carey Price. Craig Anderson's a good goaltender, but he's not, and he's actually, to me, an above-average goaltender, but he's not as good as Carey Price. And Robin Lehner, he's going to be a really good goaltender in this league, and maybe even an elite goaltender in this league, but he's not going to be as good as Carey Price. But as of right now, he's not as good as Carey Price. He has a lot of proving himself to do. Then you look out west. The Winnipeg Jets. Goaltending is horrid. Andre Pavelec is just an absolute disaster in goal. Even though he's got a lot of talent, he's very inconsistent. And Michael Hutchinson, he's expected to be a good goalie, but he's still a young, unproven talent. You don't know what you're going to get from him. The Calgary Flames. They signed Jonas Hiller over the offseason this year. They signed Jonas Hiller over the offseason this year, and they also have Kari Ramo, but they're not as good as Carey Price. Jonas Hiller's a good goaltender, and he does have the best, flashiest glove save in the National Hockey League, but he's not as good as Carey Price. The Edmonton Oilers, they got Ben Scrivens, obviously, and they also have Victor Fost. Neither of them they're both solid, but they're not as good as Carey Price. And then in the Vancouver Canucks, they signed Ryan Miller over the offseason, and at one time, and they also have Eddie Lack and Jacob Markstrom, who can both battle for jobs. Both battled for the backup job. Now, at one time, you could say that Ryan Miller was a better goaltender than Carey Price at one time. He was a Vezina Trophy winner back in 2010, and he's won 40 games in a season twice. But Ryan Miller's getting older now. He's 33 or 34 years of age, and at this day and age, Carey Price is probably a better goaltender. So, you look at the Montreal Canadiens. They have the best situation in all areas of their team. They're built to be a playoff team. They're built to make the playoffs, and despite the losses and despite the fact that they maybe were one of the worst teams in the offseason, this is still a roster with the potential to not only get back to the Eastern Conference Finals, but if Carey Price can stay healthy throughout the whole playoffs, go farther in the playoffs. Now, as far as my personal opinions, I think the fact that Montreal didn't sign enough players and maybe didn't go and get another forward or even another really good shutdown defenseman, that could be an Achilles heel for Montreal this year, and that could hurt them. That could hurt them in the long run, which is why I do think it's going to be kind of a setback year for the Montreal Canadiens, but I don't think it's going to be a setback year in the sense that they're going to completely miss the playoffs. I think they're still going to make the playoffs, and they'll obviously still finish with a winning record, but they're not going to go as far in the playoffs, and they're not going to finish as high in the standings. I still think they're the third best team, maybe even the second. I still think they're the third best team in the division. I'm convinced that the Tampa Bay Lightning are probably a better team. They're both going to battle that second spot in the Atlantic Division. The Boston Bruins, they're the best team in the division, no doubt. It's going to be a battle between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Montreal Canadiens for the honor of number 2. But I just think considering the talent that Tampa Bay has and the talent that's coming up for the future, I just think they're a much better team they're more well-rounded and they're better built than the Montreal Canadiens. I see Montreal being more of a 6th seed this year, finishing 3rd in the division, but being more of a 6th seed this year rather than a 4th seed. And I see them maybe being eliminated in the 1st or 2nd round of the playoffs. So it's going to be a setback year in that sense, but they're still going to be a playoff team. So Montreal fans, even though it is going to be kind of a setback year for them, yes, the Montreal Canadiens are a playoff team this year. And that'll do it for episode 153 of Hockey on the Spot. Be sure to join me again tomorrow when the NHL's 30 Teams in 30 Days continues, when we talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning. So until then, this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all again tomorrow. Thank you, and have a great day.